Would you please state your name for the record?
Paul Michael Duffy.
What do you do for work?
I'm a lieutenant detective with the Massachusetts State Police. I've been employed by them for 26 years.
Okay, on April 12th, did you receive a phone call about a murder in Newton?
Yes, around 9:15 a.m., informing me that there was a homicide involving a child. I then called the district attorney's office to inform them.
Whom did you specifically call?
Andy Barber, the assistant district attorney.
After telephoning Mr. Barber, what did you proceed to do?
I went to the crime scene.
So you get to the park and meet Mr. Barber. What happens next?
They explained the basic logistics of the crime scene. I learned that the victim's name was Benjamin Rifkin.
After you investigated the crime scene, did you interview the victim's fellow classmates?
No.
Why not?
There was some delay about getting into the school. You know, about whether it was necessary for there to be a lawyer when the kids were being interviewed.
Who was working the case with you for the DA's office?
Mr. Barber.
The defendant's father? Did you know him previously?
Yes, for many years.
And did it strike you by this time that there was something inappropriate about Andy working the case with his son's school involved?
No, we had no reason to believe any students were involved.
And are there any other suspects you're considering?
Yes, a man named Leonard Patz, a local sex offender who lived by the park.
Did you eventually interview the students?
Yes.
And what did you learn?
Well, we learned at some length that there was an ongoing beef between Benjamin and Jacob. Ben had been bullying Jacob. That led us to begin considering him as a suspect.
Even when his father was running the investigation?
No, a new district attorney was appointed, you. Evidence developed to the effect that he had a knife, and he stated his intention to defend himself with it if the victim continued to bully him. The defendant had also come to school with a small amount of blood on him. We learned these things from the defendant's friend, Derek Yu.
Can you elaborate on the story found on the website The Cutting Room?
Yes, it's a site where people post fantasy stories, mostly about sex and violence.
Did you find a story related to the case?
Yes, it described the murder essentially from the murder's point of view. The names were changed, but it was obviously the same case.
Who wrote it?
The defendant.
How do you know?
The defendant's friend, Derek Yu.
Were you able to confirm this?
No, it was traced back to a computer at Pete's coffee shop. Pete's does not require users to sign on, so anyone could have written it.
What was so compelling about the story?
It contained every detail of the murder, down to the entry angle of the knife.
But I see here you didn't arrest the defendant immediately.
No, we still wanted to find the knife as well as any other missing evidence. We got a warrant and searched the house.
And what did you find?
Nothing relevant to the case.
And this boy Derek Yu, were you able to corroborate his claim? Any proof that the defendant owned a knife?
No. No, there was none.
Was the murder weapon ever found?
No.
Alright, no further questions.
In a case with this much blood, wounds this grievous, would you expect the attacker to have quite a bit of blood on him?
Not necessarily.
Isn't it very likely, Detective?
Yes, it's likely.
Of course, in a stabbing, the attacker is so close, you would expect it. And what Derek Yu described was that Jacob had small amounts of blood on his right hand. This doesn't match up.
Yes.
Just on his hands?
Correct.
Jacob was in school minutes after the murder?
Yes.
Now, on the question of Mr. Barber's role in the case, does it seem wrong that Mr. Barber considered Mr. Patz as a suspect?
No, it made perfect sense based on the limited information we had at the time.
Has any evidence come out that clears him directly?
No.
Right, no, because the angle was simply dropped. And all of this is perfectly consistent with Jacob's explanation that he discovered the body after the attack and touched her with his right hand.
Consistent, but not the only explanation.
So in all the years of knowing the Barbers, did you once suspect anything dangerous about Jacob?
No.
No further question.
Please state your name.
Karen Rakowski. I'm a criminalist with the Massachusetts State Police.
Alright, going back to yesterday, based on your observation of the blood spatters, would you expect to find blood on the attacker's body?
Well, you see, not necessarily. Depending on which artery was punctured, more or less blood could have been ejected.
Are you familiar with the saying, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence?
Yes, it means that just because there's no physical evidence proving a person's presence at a particular time and place, you cannot necessarily conclude that he was not actually there.
No further questions.
The government mentioned the phrase that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Isn't it also true that the absence of evidence is precisely that, an absence of evidence?
Yes.
In this case, we have a fairly substantial absence of evidence, don't we? There's no blood evidence against the defendant, right?
No.
Genetic evidence, DNA?
Nope.
Hairs, fibers?
No.
Anything at all that puts the defendant at the scene beside that print?
No.
No handprints, footprints, anything?
No.
Well, that's what I call an absence of evidence. Finally, with regard to the knife, isn't it true that there are many knives besides the one described in the story that could have created those wounds?
Yes, I presume.
Because all you have to judge are the characteristics of these wounds.
Yes.
And therefore, all you know is that the weapon had jagged edges and a certain size blade?
True.
Do you have any idea roughly how many knives would fit the description of the wounds? 1,000?
I don't know. Plenty.
So our chances of the knife being Jacob's are very slim. No further question.